we celebrated Janmashtami in Tokyo, Japan. And that was a very intimate Janmashtami celebration. Srila Prabhupada started the tradition of reading the Krishna book on Janmashtami, as much as you could. He said, read the whole Krishna book if you can, but read it constantly throughout the day. So Srila Prabhupada, he wanted us to cook a feast. Now, Dinapan was the printer that was printing our books in those days, so they were courting Prabhupada. So they put him up in a nice house, and they had a chauffeur-driven car and everything come to him. And the temple was in another building. So we all went to Srila Prabhupada's house on Janmashtami Day, because he wanted us to cook a big feast for midnight and read the Krishna book during the day. So we sat around and we started reading the Krishna book, and how it took a turn, and Tamal Krishna took a turn, and Kirtananda took a turn. So then Srila Prabhupada said, now it's my turn. So he took the Krishna book and he started reading it. And I could see in Srila Prabhupada's eyes, you can see when a person reads something, how if they're really fascinated with something, that you can tell by the manner and the exclamations they make and the feeling that they put into the reading. And Srila Prabhupada was reading very feelingly. And later on, I had talked to Prabhupada, and I said, Prabhupada, you were reading that Krishna book so feelingly. And Prabhupada said, yes. He said, I like to read my Krishna book. It's very entertaining. It's not that just because I wrote it, I don't care about reading it anymore. He said, these are Krishna's pastimes. And it's very ecstatic to read the pastimes of Krishna. So like that, we went on and on, all day long, reading the Krishna book until midnight. And we didn't finish the whole Krishna book, but we took a pretty good piece out of it.
Once, when Prabhupada blasted me, I remember, this was in Vrindavan during Radha Damodar. This was when he spoke from Nectar of Devotion. He had Nectar of Devotion classes every day, every afternoon in the garden. And at this time I was still only a servant for perhaps 1 month. I was learning a lot still. And when we went into the garden there, I was recording, and there were many flies. They were buzzing about Srila Prabhupada, and he said, but no one was, we were just sitting there, everyone was paying attention to class, and he said, get a fan. So I had come and I had a chamara fan, and Prabhupada was speaking, and I was doing this. I was doing an arati ceremony to Srila Prabhupada. Nothing practical at all. Flies were buzzing around, but instead of just chasing flies, I was there. There were many devotees there, and I was enjoying doing this service. I was Prabhupada's servant. Here I was, turning the whisk around, and the flies were there, and Prabhupada went and like that, and still I was so, enamored by the situation, and just so dull-headed that I continued going like this. So finally, Srila Prabhupada looked at me, he said, get someone up here with some intelligence. And I mean, of course, there were, could have been 100 devotees there, and I was just, I was so devastated. And so I got down, and who should grab the chamara was this devotee, whose name was Kunja Bahari, he was known at the time, this was even back in 1972, he was very crazy devotee, very peculiar, and he went up there and he started swatting at these flies. So now I'm sitting back about that big by the tape recorder trying to occupy myself like I have something to do so I don't have to pay attention to what just happened to me. And he's swatting at these flies, And I'm looking up at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada looked at him and nodded his head in appreciation, which just further devastated me at the time, like I had failed. Here I am as servant, and I was a total failure. And so the rest of the class went on, and he continued to harass the flies so that they didn't bother our spiritual master. So he was satisfied, and Kunja Bahari was in ecstasy, and I was still trying to deal with my false ego.
And then the next day was Vyasa Puj. So, Kirtananda was a senior disciple. I mean, senior means you were devotee for 2 or 3 years in those days, so it wasn't that we were all so well seasoned, but We should have known how to celebrate Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja. So Srila Prabhupada arrived at the temple about, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And, no, it wasn't 11 o'clock, it was 11:30, like that. And he came and he sat on the Vyasasana and he said, where's the Pushpa? Now we were thinking, Pushpa, what is Pushpa? And Sudama was thinking, oh, he wants Pushpa, Pushpa rice, a fancy kind of rice called, what do they call it? Pushpa, there's some kind of rice called Pushpa with all these nuts and, curd balls and everything like that in it. So he immediately starts making this rice, which delays the process even further. And he said, well, where's the feast? By this time the feast is late. So where's the garlands? We didn't have any garlands. And there was no flowers to do the Pushpanjali. So Srila Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasasana with a whole temple room full of people. And he said, no Pushpanjali. The feast is not ready. You're not saying the right prayers. There's no garlands for the deities. He said, how is this a Vyasa Puja? This is not the Vyasa Puja. He said, this is a disgrace. And he got up and he walked out the door. And we were all devastated. What has to be done? Kirtananda started to cry. Because Prabhupada called him personally. He says, Kirtananda, you are a senior disciple. I mean, you don't know how to celebrate the spiritual master's appearance day? You don't have any understanding? He said, this is a disgrace. He said, tomorrow we will celebrate it properly. We walked out the door. The whole temple was full of guests. Everybody was like a cold ice pick had stabbed into their heart. So we were all devastated, and he called us over to his house that same day. He said, now I will tell you, and you must never forget for the rest of your life, this is the way you must celebrate, this Vyasa Puja. And he told us, say these prayers. You have the offering ready. The offering has to go on 1 minute before 12. It has to be on the altar at 12. The flowers have to be there for the Pushpanjali. You must stand, offer the spiritual master 3 times, bow down 3 times, say the Mangalacharanam prayers, say the prayers to the spiritual master. Have homage. We didn't have any homages written either. You must have the homages written. Everything must be there. This is the way you must celebrate the appearance of the spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada was very, very strict with his disciples, but at the same time he was very kind. But once you became his disciple, it wasn't that he wasn't kind to you anymore, but he wanted to, he wanted you to be trained up in Krishna consciousness. He wanted, for your own benefit, for your own spiritual benefit, that you would know these right things to do and not be offensive by your ignorance. So the next day, Prabhupada came back to the temple again, and we celebrated exactly the way he wanted us to do it. He was pleased. He was pleased.